Hello, and welcome back to another video in Essay Master's MBA essay course. Here, we're going to look at Harvard's personal statement and how we can take tips from it and apply them to other schools. Let's get right to it. So as a reminder, your personal statement, more than any other essay, is your chance to show the program, Harvard or otherwise, who you are. It's admittedly a pretty broad statement, as seen by Harvard's prompt, which reads, as we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? Well, you can narrow this down some by thinking about what this is not asking for, not what you want to do in your career, not your professional experiences in themselves, but rather who you are as reflected through those experiences. But even still, this is a pretty enormous question. So how do you start? Well, simply enough by just knowing what to brainstorm. Start with who am I? Just jot down for 5 to 10 minutes whatever comes to mind. In the brainstorming phase, it's really important to emphasize this. There are no wrong answers or thoughts. You may come up with 30 ideas, but since you'll only use one, it's really okay if 25 of them are terrible. This is less about having the perfect idea and more about brain dumping everything out so you can make sense of what your options are. Also ask yourself, what would I want someone to most know about me? This is a great way to elevate what you care about most to the forefront. You'll likely find yourself passionate about it and excited about it, which always makes for a great essay. And finally, you can also ask, what activity, trait, or event most defines me? Again, there's no wrong answer here. We've seen Harvard essays talking about everything from working in a parent's woodwork shop to being raised in a country in Southern Africa. It's less about what you write about and more about what it shows about you as an individual. With that said, here are some things to keep in mind and things to avoid as you work on these. 1, stand out with your story. The important thing to emphasize here is your. We may sound like a broken record, but we can't emphasize enough how much of a personal statement this needs to be. With that said, don't try and stand out by talking about why school. It's definitely natural at the end of a Harvard essay or elsewhere to culminate with a couple of sentences explaining how all of these moments have led you to apply to Harvard's business school, but you don't want to make it the main focus of your personal statement. That's what the why school essay is for. In a similar vein, pick what matters to you. As a thought exercise, I've gone skydiving. I like it, but it's not something that really matters to me personally. So if I were writing this essay for Harvard, I wouldn't write about my adventures with skydiving. On the other hand, if skydiving does mean something important to you and you can explain how it's led you to this moment, then go for it. But don't just pick what you think is different for the sake of being different. One of the best Harvard essays I ever read was about coming from a small town in the South. Is it common and cliche to talk about humble origins? A little bit, but the details and the personal nature of the essay made it blow past concerns about cliche. So don't be different just to be different. When you're coming up with your ideas, we recommend brainstorming at least 10. I mentioned earlier in this video coming up with about 30 ideas. And while we do recommend as many as possible, at least having 10, you'll have enough to unearth 1 or 2 golden ideas. And one final note, please do not copy and paste from another school. We most commonly see this with Stanford, where their first essay asks, what do you value most and why? And although the content's likely to overlap, Harvard can tell when you are copying and pasting, especially from Stanford because of the overlap in quality. So don't do it. Just write this particular essay and then any other personal statements to be as unique as you can. So with that said, now let's provide a good and a bad example of an opening paragraph, a body paragraph, and a closing paragraph. We'll start with how not to write an opening paragraph. It reads, quote, be satisfied with your business and learn to love what you were bred to do. Marcus Aurelius. A few years ago, I learned the hard way why pursuing a job for the money instead of for the calling would not work out. Now, if you're thinking this is overly simplified, no one likes this, actually, we do see a lot of people write like this, even for a program like Harvard Business School. And it doesn't work for 3 main reasons. 1, don't start with someone else's words. As famous and helpful as the former Roman emperor's words are, they're not your words. Save space and write about your own thoughts and experiences. 2, there's no specificity. What's the job that he chased for money? What's the job that he wishes he had chased? Why is he quoting Marcus Aurelius? And finally, you don't need to set up your story like this. Just get right to the story. Now, with that said, here's how you write a good opening paragraph. It reads, I didn't know what to believe, and with hypothermia setting in, I didn't know if I could make it. The water was 48 degrees Fahrenheit, and I had been in it for 30 minutes. Luckily, I was headed back to shore, but it had been a frustrating experience. I had always been a good swimmer, and I could have made it back before now, but those weren't the rules. The 12 of us were instructed to swim and finish as a team. Then again, the same people told us the water would be warm and to jump in without wetsuits. Now, immediately, we have a much stronger sense about this person. The vivid description of hypothermia, swimming, and being in a team of 12 people put us into the scene. We have an anecdote that is both captivating in itself and can later build out to valuable lessons for an MBA program, like grit and leadership in the face of adversity or uncertainty. And finally, you don't really have to fight for the reader's attention the rest of the way because you already have it. Just like a bad opener can make it really difficult to keep the reader's attention throughout, a good opener can actually make it pretty easy to keep the reader's attention so long as you don't do anything to lose it from there. Once you get to the body of your essay, it's easy to fall into some traps. This one includes some of them. Here we have, while working on Wall Street, I acquired skills in communication, leadership, and finance. I became a better employee and developed the tools needed for an MBA program. Then I decided to launch my own business where I gained further knowledge. Now, one thing we really want to emphasize here, your personal statement can tell a story that takes place within something from your professional life, but it should not be your resume in paragraph format. Right now, what you read here is just a summary of the resume. It's not telling us who this applicant is and how they may wind up contributing to campus. And finally, just like before, there's no real specificity here. Aside from being on Wall Street, which especially for a program like Harvard Business School is pretty vague, there's not any real detail here. We don't know anything about this person. On the other hand, this body paragraph reads well. Here it says, I was surprised at the volume of responses. Friends from high school, middle school, French, Ivorian, and mixed wrote back. Some said they were feeling helpless in front of all the destruction and hatred, and that they regained some courage by reading my email. One friend told me that he had received my email from 4 different sources within a couple of hours. He added that I should consider running for president and that he would vote for me. At that point, I understood that being a leader did not necessarily entail doing extraordinary things all the time. Sometimes just an email is enough. Now, this really works because, unlike the previous slide, we have actual details here. And while the lesson does get said at the end with, quote, I understood that being a leader did not necessarily entail doing extraordinary things all the time, it's pretty well shown up to that point how one can be a good leader. And finally, we get a sense of the stakes of the story. It's clear they can contribute to Harvard Business School, and guess what? They would go on to do so because this essay actually did get them into Harvard. Now, when it comes time to end your essay, this can be actually really difficult. As a general rule, we like to say, bring it back full circle. But doing that, of course, is easier said than done. Here's how not to do it. In summary, attending Harvard would allow me to become the type of leader I have always envisioned. With a Harvard degree, I can eventually become CFO of a business, launch my own company, or network into a new industry. Harvard, thus, would give me the best chance to excel wherever I go. For starters, you need to wrap up, not summarize. Well, what does that mean? It means that your story needs to end, not that you need to spend most of your time reflecting. Some reflection's fine, of course, and you will eventually want to bring it back to the top, but this particular example is not storytelling. It's just the type of close you'd see in a middle school essay. Also, you don't want to add new information here. If the information that you want to add is important, put it in the body. And finally, we don't really know what this applicant's purpose is in attending Harvard Business School. More or less, everyone wants to become a leader, and the 3 things this applicant mentions are pretty much every applicant's options, short of just quitting entirely, which you're obviously not going to do. Don't reveal new information, but whatever information you do speak to, make sure it's specific and deliberate. On the other hand, we have a strong ending to this essay. Quote, when a student who specialized in breaking windows gave me his beautiful oil painting, I understood that my time and energy had been well spent. After a year of mentoring, 3 of the 4 students are now calmer, kinder, and perform in the top 10% of their class. Personally, I progressed as a leader by addressing my weakness of impatience. This experience taught me that as an agent of change, one does not necessarily need corporate experience. Instead, one requires creativity, patience, and emotional intelligence. Here, we're really summarizing quite nicely. Yes, there is a little bit of reflection, but it feels like a natural close. Furthermore, once again, there's a lot of specificity here, but in the body of this essay, these details are already mentioned, so it's not a surprise to bring them back. And finally, only at the end are things said and not shown. So spend some time on your personal statement. It is the most important statement after all. But once you're confident about it, we'll study 2 particular essays at Stanford and Wharton, which will give us valuable tips on how to write the Why School essay.